Hey there, Heather. Hello there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Cutter tribute video. And today, on January the 5th, we are tributing the 1962 8 Toronto Maple Leafs and the 1975 Los Angeles Kings in a 7-game series called the Bob Pulford Tribute Series. Reason being, you see the reason being is this: Bob Pulford passed away today. He played for the Leafs and the Kings. He was head coach of the Kings for a while and then actually spent 30 years in Chicago as a coach and GM. So he played junior hockey for the Toronto Marlboros, and of course the Leafs. That was their farm system before the draft was existing. So he won 2 Memorial Cups, which is big because Canadian Hockey League. That's the pinnacle prize. And legendary CHL/OHL commissioner David Branch passed away today. So I already did a tribute on him. So yeah. So he played 14 years with the Leafs, starting in 1957, wearing number 20. Pulford won 4 Stanley Cups for the Leafs in 62, 63, 64, and 67. He scored a famous overtime goal in Game 3 of the 1967 Stanley Cup Finals at Maple Leaf Gardens with the series tied 1-1 against the youngster rookie Vachon, who Montreal decided to put in the net instead of maybe Charlie Hodge or Gump Worsley. Anyway, Pulford scored in Game 3 in double overtime, and the Leafs went on to win the series in 6. Pulford, ironically, would coach Vachon in Los Angeles because Boogie Vachon was big for Los Angeles after Montreal traded him to LA because Vachon didn't want to play for Montreal with Ken Dryden around. The Leafs would trade him to the Kings before the 1970-71 season, and he played 2 years before being retired. Immediately after he was a retired as a player, the Kings gave him the head coach reins in 72-73 and led for 5 seasons before the Blackhawks came calling to be coach GM in 1977. He actually helped LA become one of the best defensive/penalty killing teams in the NHL. He was named the Jackass Award for Coach of the Year in 1975. I think that was the second time that happened. When did the award start? I think it was 74, wasn't it? 51 times. So yeah, so that was like early. 74? Well, anyway, in 75, the Keys put up 105 points, which was actually a team record till 2013. Not even the 2012 team that won the Stanley Cup did that because they were the 8th seed. And they won a few playoff series in 76 and 77. Unfortunately, though, they would choke against the Leafs in 1975. The Leafs were terrible, but then they pulled off an upset over the LA Kings before I think the Flyers got them. Anyway, Pulford left the Kings because Jack Kent Cooke, the owner of the Kings/Lakers, would meddle in his affairs. Pulford wanted to be GM as well as coach, but Cooke would often meddle in player personnel matters and would trade promising young players and draft picks for veterans. That was even more true. Well, one of the trades that the Kings actually came out on top of was the Marcel Dion trade because Detroit wanted to get rid of him because of his headache, and it worked out. On 3 occasions, Pulford would become coach of the Blackhawks. He was promoted to senior VP and then became a GM from 1992 to 1997, and then again from 1999 to 2000 and 2003 to 2005. Anyway, in 7 seasons as head coach of the Hawks over 3 stints, he won 182 games, 176 losses, and 68 ties. He actually ended up second for most regular season wins by a Hawks coach behind Billy Ray. Well, he's third. 182 is still third place behind Ray and Joe Quenneville. Yeah, he was actually head coach of Team USA during the first Canada Cup tournament in 1976 that saw 6 nations face each other in hockey. He was inducted to the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1991 and all that. So, yeah, he died at age 89. His son in law is Steve Lombardi. He used to be general manager of the Sharks and Kings. Pulford's NHL career 281 goals in 1,079 games, 643 points. A couple of 20 goal seasons early in his career. And well, 28 was his highest in 1966. In the playoffs, he would have 25 goals, 51 points in 89 games, but no playoff games as a Kings player. His stuff with the playoffs. He was 27-43 in the postseason. They lost the first. They lost the quarterfinals in '74 to the Hawks. '75 they lost the prelims to Toronto, which was shocking. '76 they lost to Boston in the quarters. '77 they lost to Boston in the quarters. '78 with Chicago they lost in the quarters to Boston. '79 in the quarters they lost to the Islanders. And in '82 when he became interim head coach, he was the one that helped the Hawks get to the Stanley Cup semifinals, but lost to Vancouver, who were on a massive Cinderella run. In '85, he took over for a team that actually ended up going to the conference finals against the powerful Edmonton Oilers, and that actually had 69 goals in 6 games. I kid you not. In '86, he led the team to win the Norris Division. Well, they were the Smythe champs in '78 and '79, but in '86, the Norris, but they got swept by the Toronto Maple Leafs of all freaking teams. The crazy thing is, he helped his teams win 3 division titles, and in the playoffs, he was 0-11. Swept by Boston, swept by the Oilers, and swept in the best of 5 by the Leafs. In '87, they got swept by the Red Wings in the division semifinals. And then in 2000, he was there with 28 wins in 2000. So 363 career wins as a head coach. Not bad. Yeah, he was LA's main coach in the 80s. So we put the '68 team for the Leafs. That's the team that he played for. Well, of course, '67 is not available in Stone Cold Hockey. And 1975 as a head coach for the Kings, who should have taken out the Leafs. So we're going to do a 7-game series. We are going to play until we get to 7 games, until someone gets to 3 wins. Game 1 saw the Kings win in overtime on a goal by Butch Goring, future Islanders icon, who was actually traded to the Islanders in 1980 for Dave Lewis at the trade deadline, as they call it, and it was the first main trade deadline deal in history. Mike Murphy, future Leafs head coach, and Bob Nevin, former Leaf, were the ones on the assists. The other Kings goals were by Bob Murdoch, future Blackhawks player, and Komadowski. Murray Oliver and Ron Ellis for the Leafs. Pulford got an assist on Ellis's goal. Game 2? Oh, sorry. Game 1 was it Bruce Edwards beating Bruce Campbell? Anyway, it's not Don Edwards. No, that's Gary Edwards. Sorry. Game 2 saw the Kings win 2-1 as Rookie beat Bauer. Kings goals by Mike Murphy, future Leafs head coach, and Tommy Williams, not Tiger Williams, Tommy Williams, who was one of the few NHL players in the '70s from the United States. Marcel Protophil, former Red Wings D-man, scored a goal from Murray Oliver and Jim Pappen. Game 3 sees the Kings shut down the Leafs 5-0 as Vachon does his job against Bauer. Juha Whitting, one of the first Swedish stars in the NHL in the 1970s, before Börje Salming, put up a hat trick. Tommy Williams and Murray Corrigan scoring for the Kings as well. So it looks like the Kings are going to sweep the Leafs. But we'll have to give you one full game. It will be Gary Edwards back in the net against Bruce Campbell. That's right. The '68 Leafs, this was the first year after their Stanley Cup win and after expansion ruined them of players. The LA Kings took Terry Suchak from them. So yeah, Bruce Campbell, the backup to Johnny Bauer. Campbell had heart problems. He even suffered a heart attack during a game as a Flyer. Rogie Vachon and Gary Edwards. Rogie was the main goalie for the '75 Kings, and then was traded to. Was he traded to the Red Wings for Marcel or no? I think he was. Anyway, the '75 Kings did not even have Marcel Dion on the team, and LA needed some help. Anyway, here's the lineups. The LA Kings with Bob Nevin, former Leaf, Mike Murphy, future Leafs head coach, Dan Maloney. I know you would say, wait, Kitchener? Nope, he actually was not. That was Dave Maloney, who was a Kitchener Ranger. Dan Maloney played for London. Butch Goring, who 5 years later would help the Islanders win the Stanley Cup, being the second centerman. Juha Whitting from Sweden. Bob Barry, who would go on to be a head coach for the Blues and the Canadiens. Tom Williams, one of the few Americans in the NHL in the '70s. Frank St. Marcel, former Blues icon in 1968. Don Kosak, Bob Murdoch, future defenseman for the Hawks and coach of the Jets. Mike Corrigan, Gene Carr, future former Blue. Terry Harper, former Habs defenseman. Neil Komadowski. Sheldon Kitchener. That's right, Sheldon Kengisser is one of them. He was it? Yeah, I'll show you. Yeah, Sheldon Kangasser. Yeah, he played for the Kitchener Rangers in 1966 and 1967. I knew he was a Kitchener Ranger because he didn't he cartwheeled somebody. Was it Bobby Orr? I can't remember. Larry Brown, defenseman, not the former coach of the Philadelphia 76ers and Detroit Pistons, among others. Vic Benetsky, Dave Hutchinson, former Leaf, and all that. The 68 Leafs, lots of players. Mike Shaker Walton being there big. Ron Ellis, number 6 in the programs. Bob Pulford. Yeah, of course, that's Bob Pulford. Novak Mihaljevic was traded to Detroit. He had lots of exhaustion. Punch and Black was meddling in his affairs. Murray Oliver, former Bruins player. George Armstrong, the chief and captain, still around. Jim Pappin. He also scored a key goal for the Leafs in the 67 playoffs. Davey Keon, number 14. Brian Conacher, Charlie Conacher's son. Or is it grandson? I think it was grandson because, or was it son? I can't remember. Wayne Carlton, Pete Stamkowski, he went to Detroit as well as Frank Mahovlich. Uke Power. Floyd Smith, future Leafs head coach and GM. Normie Allman, who was a Leaf killer as a Red Wing, but now on the Leafs. Paul Henderson. Henderson scores for Canada. You know, that guy from 1972. Tim Horton from Tim Hortons Donuts, 20 plus years as a Leaf before he went to the Rangers. Marcel Protovo, former Red Wing. Larry Hillman, who played for all the original 6 teams minus Montreal. Mike Byers. Alan Stanley, good defenseman. Dwayne Rupp. Gary Unger went to Detroit. He was a lead prospect, although he would have been remembered for his Blues time. Tom Martin, Jim McKenney, and Mike Pellick for the No Goalies. LA cannot get a shot off. 5 minutes later, 5 minutes later, Pulford, of all people. Gordon missed a mistake. Walton, he couldn't score for him. Ketsky, Peppa power play goal. Harper's Brassard with the goal. Harper from Barry and Carr makes it 1-0 Kings. With 2 minutes left in the period. Hutchison. Can the Leafs capitalize? Nope, that's Davey Keon. And the segment's killed. 5 minutes later, aggression. Injured the Leafs defense, and Murdoch goes off. But they get the kill zone. 4 minutes later, aggression. And Kelly on Maloney. That's Dan Maloney. And kill the zone, so the Leafs can't do anything. 3 minutes later. Toronto, Stanley had a chance. And the Kings are up 1-0 after 2 periods of play. So it looks like this might be a quick sweep. 3 minutes into the third. Harry takes a chance. Kamowski, no. 4 minutes later. Aggression. And a chance for scoring. 9. 5 minutes later. Into the clock. And they score. Maloney Baloney. Dan with the goal from David and Komodowski makes it 2-0. Yeah, the Kings needed to get better scoring power. That's why they kind of went for 5 minutes later. Fight between Dan Maloney and Bob Pulford. So Pulford decides to fight. Player hangs on, surprisingly, the player hangs on, gives as well as he takes against the tough guy. 4 minute timing. Empty net? No. Empty net? No. That's it. The LA Kings win 2-0, and the 68 Leafs are stunned. They couldn't do anything. But, well, the Kings took 4 penalties to the Leafs 2, but the only power play goal was Lazingales. Harper from Barry and Carr, Maloney from Nevin and Komanowski. So that's just brutal. So let's take a look at the 4-game series. The Leafs only scored, 3 goals? The Kings scored 12, and the Leafs only scored 3, I think, right? Yeah. Gamble 0-2, Bauer 0-2. Ron Ellis, Murray Oliver, Marcel Protovo were the only ones to get goals. Papin to assist, Murray goal and assist. That's it. Yeah, they only scored 3 goals. Whereas the 60 to 75 Kings, Vachon was 2-0, and Gary Edwards 2-0, both only giving up 3 goals. Yeah, I don't think they gave up any goals in Toronto. Ua Whitting put up 3 goals, had a hat trick. Tom Williams 2, and then the other guys with 1 goal each. 4 points by Bob Murdoch, a goal and 3 assists. So yeah, so that kind of was embarrassing for Toronto. You scored 3 goals in Los Angeles, but you can't score on home ice. I mean, that's just pathetic. But there it goes. And yeah, Pulford was a good GM in a sense, but he wasn't the main GM when. Yeah, Keenan was the GM when they made the runs, and then Pulford took over and was not so successful. But whatever. So the Kings are going to be as sad as the Leafs are with him. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.